the referee again checking his watch. And there it goes! The final whistle!
Carl Corazon will wait inside the box for this from Martin Knapp. And a header on it there, and that might have been it. That was a goal for Canada. The header was it Jason DeVos?
One last chance for Canada. Sophie Schmidt takes a deflection. Matheson! Is that the goal that wins bronze for Canada?
Qualified for World Cup 86, defeating Honduras by a score of 2-1 here in St. John, Newfoundland this afternoon.
Welcome to the Canada Soccer Nation podcast. My name is Jason DeVos. I'm the Director of Development with Canada Soccer. And as always, I'm joined by Brad Fougere, Digital and Corporate Communications Manager with Canada Soccer. Brad, how are you dealing with the heat right now? It is scorching hot in Ontario. You're based in Ottawa. I'm based in Toronto, but it is hotter than the surface of the sun right now. How are you managing that process at the moment?
Yeah, I'll tell you that splash pad is
it's getting regular bashed.
Yeah. It is not too bad in my basement if I'm really honest. But with each level that I go up, I live in a 3-story townhouse. In each level I go up, it's about 6 or 7 degrees warmer on each floor. We went to a soccer field yesterday, my 2 children and I, to kick around for a few minutes. I've never felt that kind of heat in my whole life. I mean, from Halifax, I don't know if listeners know, but Ontario summers are not my bag. And, it is rough.
Was it a grass field or an artificial surface?
At some point, it was a grass field. It is now just like a yellowed, like scratchy puff of dust as you walk across it. It's pretty rough.
It's remarkable how quickly the grass can go from green to burnt in Ontario in the heat of summer. It's scorching here right now. I feel for anyone anywhere in the country dealing with heat that is on an artificial surface, because that can exacerbate things significantly as well. But aside from regularly visiting the splash pad, how are your kids holding up through the heat wave?
Yeah, they're doing okay. It's the summer now. And so we've tried to just embrace that summer is a time when the kids are at home, and that's just the normal comings and goings. And while it's been going on a little bit longer than we're used to, this is the summer months, and we need to find ways to entertain ourselves and keep busy. Staying active is key, but again, it's a little difficult when you can barely breathe when you're outside. But yeah, we're embracing the summer.
Variety, it's a spice of life. It's too hot in the summer, too cold in the winter, but we love the variety of what we get in terms of weather in our country, which is fantastic. In terms of Canada Soccer, online work, webinars, what do we have coming up in the not too distant future?
Yeah, for sure. Well, as we've been talking about, we're beginning to wind down some of this webinar stuff and back to the business of soccer, which is exciting for everyone involved, of course. But we do have one last Canada Soccer Nation Inside Presents webinar with the Men's Excel program. That will be a French language webinar, and we'll cover both Men's Excel program 101 and 102 content that was well received from John Herdman and his staff. And will be run by men's national team assistant coach and U18 to U23 program director Mauro Biello, as well as Andrew Olivieri, the men's Excel U14 to U17 program director. So sure to be great content there for our French language friends across the country, Quebec, New Brunswick, Ontario, Saskatchewan, et cetera. So you can get information on that on our Twitter page or at canadasoccer.com under the Canada Soccer Nation Inside banner.
Awesome. Excellent. Yeah, both Mauro and Andrew have put a lot of work into the Men's Excel program alongside the leadership of John Herdman. It'll be great to listen into their presentation. It gives me an opportunity to brush up on my French. My French is not as good as it could be, not as good as it should be.
Your French is fantastic. Do not lie to us. Your French is great.
My French is not great. I can get by is probably the best way to explain my bilingualism. I can understand French. I can read French. I can speak French if I'm required to do so with notes, but I've never felt comfortable and confident in doing any sort of public speaking in French. So
just so our listeners know, I've seen you give hours-long presentations at annual meetings in French.
No, no.
Good.
That was hours long reading of specific words in French.
Well, you read very well in French, my friend. Very well.
Yeah, it's on my my personal development list. Things that I need to get better at and work on, and part of my professional development. So I've said before in La Belle Province that I want to get to a point sometime in the not too distant future, and it's challenging with everything that's going on, but I want to get to a point where I can do presentations in French in Quebec, because I feel it's important that we're able to communicate in everyone's preferred language in our country. So we've been doing a fair bit of work actually with Soccer Quebec, who are valued members and partners in developing the club licensing program, and we're going through the review process right now. And I just want to take a quick second just to ask everyone to relax and to understand that this is a process. There have no decisions have been made about the level at which each organization that has applied for the program is going to be evaluated. It's an ongoing process, and there is no need whatsoever for parents to take their children out of the club they're currently in and go to another club. It's not going to impact them in a negative way. And we're working with the clubs directly, and obviously through our partnership with Soccer Quebec, to try and support the clubs as best as possible. Dave Nutt and I have had some fantastic discussions with clubs in Quebec. So we're really excited about what the future holds there, but it's a process. It's an ongoing process, and one that we ask everyone to just, take a breath and don't panic. It's an ongoing long-term project. So I know it's a cautionary tale, because when you tell people not to panic, they generally tend to panic, but we're trying to kind of assure everyone that we're working with the clubs to help them get better. That's what the club licensing program is. It's an assistance and support program. It's not about judgment. It's not about categorizing and blocking progress. It's about enhancing progress and providing accessible and inclusive, excellent programs for all kids who want to play soccer in their own community. So stay tuned for more news on that front in the weeks, months, years ahead. But it's an ongoing process. So it's been busy, but excited about what the future holds there. What else on your front before we get to introducing our guests for the podcast today?
Just a riff on your ideas there. When we develop these programs and these ideas, we need to go to the future state, right? The ideal future state of what it's going to be when explaining it and when helping people understand the process. You need to go to what it should be and what it would be in the future. And unfortunately, it takes a little while and some interesting detours sometimes in order to get there. And we're seeing that across a number of areas. Obviously, in the digital transformation space, across coach education, across launching a new website, which is coming in the next couple of weeks, and is very exciting. But these are steps in the right direction, right? These are steps towards the future state where we want to be as an organization and where we know we will be. And it's sometimes challenging to spend so much time and energy and effort explaining to people what that future state is going to be, and then get to the work of actually taking the steps to get to that future state. Can cause some panic, I guess is the best word.
Yeah. One of the analogies that I've used, I've always said, it's very difficult to build a house in the dark, because, people are going to see what is being built, the foundation that's being laid, the walls that are being built, and they're going to speculate about what the future state is going to look like. What we've said to everyone along this entire process, at every level across Canada, from BC all the way to Newfoundland, Labrador, is there's no need for you to take your child out of your club and go somewhere where you think there might be something better, because the most important thing is for your child to fall in love with soccer and to be with his or her friends and to play in their local community. And at such time in the future, when this future state is in place, and we do have standards-based leagues in every province across the country, at that point, you may be able to say, okay, maybe I need to find a different environment, a better environment for my child to fulfill their potential within the game. And ultimately, your organization, your club that you're at right now should celebrate that. If your child has the ability to go to a higher level, that's really what we have to start celebrating, is the progression of players to a higher level of the sport. So, again, it's a difficult message to deliver now because we're not there yet. We're still working towards what that future state looks like. But rest assured that your child's best interests are at the forefront of every decision that's going to be made. So after the break, we're going to chat with three senior leadership individuals in Saskatchewan Soccer Association. The president, the executive director, and the technical director will come to join us on the call and on the podcast and talk about all things soccer in Saskatchewan. And I'll talk about my first trip there and my experiences working with the great people in that province. And we'll get a little bit of background as we do a deep dive into Saskatchewan Soccer Association. Stay tuned. After the break, we will have them with us on the podcast. Pleased to be joined now by the three senior leadership people within the Saskatchewan Soccer Association. Lisa Baganluri is the president of the SSA. Doug Peterson is the executive director, and Raheem Mohammed is a director of soccer operations. Lisa, Doug, and Raheem, welcome to the Canada Soccer Nation podcast. How are you guys today?
Doing
Wonderful.
great. Thank you, Jason.
Everyone all at once. Brilliant. This is perfect. We're going to have a great chat. So Lisa, I'm going to start with you first as the president of Saskatchewan Soccer. Tell us a little bit about your background in the game, how you came to be the president, why you're involved, and what your love affair is with football.
Well, thanks again for having us on. It's a great opportunity, and always love connecting with Canada soccer folks. So my background came about when my daughter started out in the youth program here in Saskatoon at the community level first. My husband and I coached our daughter. My husband comes from West Africa, so obviously West Africa is huge football fans. So there was no doubt that we were going to be a football family from that point. We began coaching, and I guess when my daughter moved up to the club level, I joined a board and later became the president of that club. Moved on from there. The previous president of Saskatchewan Soccer Association, who you know really well, Don Story,
yes,
actually recruited me onto the SAS Soccer board about 9 years ago, and have been, I guess I'm in my first year of my second term of as president. So my love for football has grown significantly throughout the years as a fan, as a player, as a coach, and we live, eat, and breathe it every day of our lives. So it's it's a great sport. The team aspect of it makes great people as well. So it wasn't a hard choice.
Yeah, brilliant. You mentioned there Don Story. He's one of my favorite people to talk to. I've learned so much from that man. Me too. If people are not aware, Don Story is a board of directors member with Canada Soccer. So he's on Canada Soccer's board. He's the chair of the governance committee. I believe he's the chair of CONCACAF's governance committee as well. Mm-hmm. And I call him the godfather of governance. That's a good
term for him, for sure.
Yeah, it's funny. I first met Don. I think this goes back to 2010, and this was sort of pre-governance reform with Canada Soccer. I was obviously working in the media. I had only recently retired as a player, so I was asked to be the player rep for the men's national team program as a former national team player, and got heavily involved in governance reform through my work in the media and the work that was being done at that time. And I tell everyone, I've learned everything that I know, which is a lot more than most former players, but everything I know about governance and good governance, I learned from Don's story, and what a fantastic teacher of good governance and what it should look like in that man. So you had a very good predecessor, and several other female predecessors as well. It's one of the things that I first learned when I started working in this role about Saskatchewan soccer is the strong female presence at a governance level. You're the third female president of the SSA, correct?
That's correct. Yes.
Yeah, and one of the first provinces to enact governance reform and to have a gender balanced board as well.
Yeah, it's been relatively, I want to say, easy in terms of gender equality on our board and recruiting females. We have a lot of females that want to be involved. Governance, of course, wasn't as easy as that, but as you know, going from an operational board to a governance board, there's lots of learning and struggles within that, but we definitely purged through with Don's help. And obviously when both Doug and Raheem came on board, it was that much easier. So I credit most of that to their leadership for sure. Excellent.
And a great segue to transition to Doug Peterson, the executive director of the SSA. Doug, welcome to the podcast. Tell us a little bit about your role and your time as the executive director, because you've overseen a lot of change. But let's start first with how you came to be the executive director and what that process was like for you.
Actually, I was interviewed by Don and a number of other members of the board back in 2011 and joined this was almost 9 years now with SAS Soccer. So my background is in sports administration and community development. So I started back as an executive director with the sports of Broomball lacrosse way back in 1986, Jason. And I spent 13 years, 12 with Broomball. And then I went on to YMCA and United Way and various other community development initiatives for another 13 years. And I was really pleased to find my way back to sport, and in particular to soccer, the world's most popular game, Canada's most popular game. So it allowed me to get involved with a sport again, and it's certainly at a significantly different level than I have been in the past. So really excited about that, and we've done some good things, I think, in the last 9 years or so, and really proud to be a part of it and continuing to be a part of it here in the future. So.
Yeah. Well, we first met when I did my first sort of tour around the country when I started in this role back in September of 2016, and we met not long after that. But I was very impressed by what I saw in Saskatchewan and the progress that had been made by the organization under your leadership, obviously as executive director, and under the leadership of Dave Nutt, who I managed to convince and entice away from you to join Canada Soccer. But we'll talk a little bit in a second about what some of those programs and some of those initiatives were for you and how you led that process. But I wanted to go to Raheem Mohammed, the director of soccer operations, and talk a little bit about your background, Raheem, and how you came to be in this position, because I think I was a little bit involved in that process and may have convinced you to do so. But give us a little bit more background about your role here at Saskatchewan Soccer, Raheem.
Sure. Thanks so much for having me on, Jason. It's been an interesting period of time to get here. So I was born in Vancouver. I moved to Africa and to Kenya when I was 13. And then I moved back to London, Ontario for university. And not being able to go home in the summer, I followed the wise advice of my high school coach, who said that I would be a better coach than I was a player. And I got myself into coaching. And I think I fell in love with it very quickly and realized that soccer has always been a part of my life. I remember waking up early Saturday mornings in Vancouver to watch the game and getting a chance to give back, and that's just evolved over time. And so transitioning from London into the US, where I worked at a Division I school for a year, back to London, and then into Toronto, where I think we got reacquainted and got to know each other a bit better, working at Toronto High Park. And I had my eyes firmly set on doing the best I could there. And then, we had a conversation about a potential opportunity here, and it was one that I couldn't pass up as an opportunity. So I appreciate the nudge in this direction, because it's been an incredible 3 years, and it's very easy to look at time past and think about all the good things that have been done, but it's just been easy. We have a wonderful board. We have a wonderful executive director, and our membership here has been nothing but supportive.
I think you and I first met, it's got to be 2009, maybe 2010. My first recollection of meeting you was you were coaching at Oak Ridge, I think, in London, and this was through Ian Campbell, who's the owner of FC London and a longtime proponent of soccer and development in that community. So that's how far we go back. But yeah, you were the technical director at Toronto High Park, weren't you? When the director of soccer operations job was vacated by Dave Nutt, and the opportunity was there. And I remember having that conversation with you and saying, this is a great opportunity because there's a lot of great work that's been done here and some great people involved. And tell us a little bit about that transition. How do you go from being a club TD to a director of soccer operations in another province that you'd never lived in before?
Yeah, it was a really good experience, because I think, whenever you're working in a role, you get to see how other roles around you operate. And so, we had a great example with a TD being Gary Miller in Ontario Soccer. And he'd always been very supportive and welcoming and, encouraging into some of the work that I had done at Toronto High Park. And so, moving into this role here, the biggest thing is probably just the scope of it, right? So you no longer are just impacting one member organization and your participants in one club. The decisions you make impact many people. And, we say this often, but there's such a diversity across our country, province by province, and then even within the province. And that was something that Dave had given me as a little bit of advice before I started, is that we have organizations as big as, a couple thousand members, and we have organizations as big as 40 members. And so trying to balance the needs of different members across just such a wide spectrum was probably the biggest challenge, I would say, is, you're not dealing with, multi-thousand member clubs like you would in the GTA. And so it's just the scope of the role being all encompassing, not just member organizations, but then, the player development pathway, coaching education, referee education, developing meaningful competition and events that bring the community together to celebrate soccer. It's been a lot of fun. It's given me a chance to work within a really strong strategic plan and put some of my own spin on a few of the different things that we have going on here.
You talk about the strategic plan, and obviously that's built in collaboration with all stakeholders, but it's led by the board of directors and obviously through the work of Don Story in previous years. I'm certain that that's embedded as a key component of what you do. Doug and Lisa, tell us a little bit about the strategic plan with SSA and how are those key priorities being met through a difficult period of time. I mean, we're dealing with a global pandemic and everything is kind of up in the air at the minute, but how important is it for you as an organization to have that strategic plan as a touchstone to go back to align your objectives and keep you going in the same direction? Doug, we'll start with you and then we'll go to Lisa.
Thanks. So yeah, we've a plan that's built on 6 pillars: player, coach, referee, organization, membership, and community. And within our plan, we have a lot of priorities that drive our work and values that support our behavior. And one of the biggest pieces, of course, within that plan is service to membership. And so for me, that's the foundation of what we try to accomplish. Our plan is very demanding of us, of staff and of the board, and also of membership. We have high expectations. And it's really driven us to try to perform at high levels. So, of course, we receive funding from SAS Sport, and we receive leadership and guidance as well from Canada Soccer. And so we do try to get out in front of a lot of issues. And there's things that we've done in the last while that we're very proud of. And, of course, Now in COVID, the last 3 months or so has been very different for us, but with the staff, with the board, and with the membership, I think we've all really come together well and performed at a very high level. And I've been so impressed with the level of collaboration and just support from everybody. That's really allowed us to be successful in COVID. And of course, that's been the foundation of how our strategic plan has been successful as well. We couldn't execute at the level we do without membership support, without strong guidance from the board, without support from our partners and funding from SAS Board, etc. And I think it's just about expectations, Jason. We set the bar really high. Our board and our membership work really hard, and our staff contribute at a similar level. And I think we can do things very well here in Saskatchewan, and I think we're proud of the stuff that we've done. So I'll defer to Lisa to get in on some of those pieces as well from her perspective.
Yeah.
And definitely the bar is high, and Doug and his team don't ever disappoint. I mean, we do a ton of reporting against the strategic plan, where we're meeting those strategic goals. And, if we're not meeting something, on track, there's always a very good reason for that. And, it doesn't happen very often, but it keeps us very informed, and as well as reporting back to the membership, letting them know, which is, of course, an important piece, so they know exactly where we're headed, and then they can align with those strategic goals as well. So certainly during COVID, it's been difficult to stay on track of a lot of those big goals, and as we move into strategic planning in the next coming year, hopefully we'll be able to do that without COVID in mind. But of course, we never know how long this is going to last, and hopefully we'll get back on track on the current strategic plan, and then be able to do more things in the upcoming strategic plan as well. So yeah.
Yeah, Lisa, how has COVID-19 changed or affected the organization from a planning perspective, or has it, or is this just a situation that you've dealt with in stride because you've had good planning in place?
Well, I think it's hard for any organization to have a plan to be able to react quickly to this. I think we're all kind of in shock how fast everything shut down. But we did react quickly, and financially, everybody's taken a hit. So our team has had to reduce, and which means staff the existing staff have had to pull up their sleeves and do a lot of things that they normally wouldn't have to do on a daily basis. So I am extremely in awe of them every day, of what we've been able to accomplish, in these last 16 weeks or so. We have weekly communications with our membership, which is extremely important, as everything is changing daily. We have every 2 weeks we meet with the membership on a Zoom call, and just kind of find out how things are going. And of course, as we prepare to get back on the pitch, and working out all those kinks. So I'm just in awe of the staff, how they've been able to manage all of the moving pieces and still be able to smile and function at the end of the day, because it's not easy, right? So, but yeah, it's been a challenge, but I think overall we've been able to serve our membership at the best of our ability, and we'll still be able to maintain that going forward. And hopefully when we're out of this, or out of the scary part of this, hopefully indoor we'll be able to bring back more and more players, and because we're at about 25% capacity of 20 of the organizations that were able to come back to play right now. So
yeah, that's a significant drop off in registration, and we've seen that across the country in many other areas where there's obviously concern about coming back to organized soccer. And I think many people are just taking a wait and see approach. But it's interesting as we go through the pandemic. Nobody has any experience dealing with this. Nobody has any wisdom to fall back on. And I think it might have been Mike Tyson that said that everybody has a plan until they get punched in the face. And I think in a lot of ways, this is the entire soccer community getting punched in the face. It's really about being fluid and adapting. Doug, I want to go to you and just ask about how you've managed that process. Obviously, it's difficult when you are having to suspend programs. You're having to make staffing decisions based on the programming that you are running. How do you adapt and be fluid in a time like this when there's so much uncertainty around?
Well, first and foremost, really, we have, again, strong leadership from the board. We have incredible support from membership, just been so patient and supportive during this time, looking for answers to questions we don't have and never demanding more from us than we're able to provide. But as a staff, we've been very diligent about being nimble and flexible, and people now have to change hats regularly. So we've have our staff team cut in half, and so people are doing 2 and 3 jobs at a time, and jobs they haven't done before. And I'm just really proud of the team, just being able to adapt and also see what the priority needs to be. Mm-hmm. And so we meet every week, and we communicate and interact through Zoom and other methods every day. And we were able to be nimble and flexible and responsive. So I've been really proud of how we adapted early on to transfer from in-person programming to online programming. And we did some really quality work with leadership from this team in all kinds of areas, offering different opportunities to engage membership. And that's what people were looking for, is just some stability to be involved in soccer in some way, whether it was online or just through communications that we hadn't had in the past. And so we are really proud of how we adapted. And I think it's just from being one, we have a strong foundation that we work from plans. And so we often talk about that. We work from a plan, and we're not going to announce details that we're not ready to announce yet, or we haven't thought through properly. And so just taking that foundation of building a plan. So early on in late March, we met with the board. We put a contingency plan budget in place with multiple scenarios in it, and which obviously involved programming and staffing. And then we just executed, Jason, week by week, staying in touch with what's happening with Saskatchewan, with what's happening with the public health authorities. And we're also really grateful to all the other provinces and to Canada Soccer. Wow. You talk about coming together as a community and sharing resources and sharing research and intelligence about what might be coming. It's just been, really wonderful opportunity from that perspective, Jason. Even though it's been a difficult time, there's a lot to be gained when people are challenged, and we're grateful for all the levels of support we had. And so, yeah, I just think, Jason, by being open-minded and not being too focused on any one thing and being able to adapt quickly has allowed us to do some quality work here in the last 3-4 months.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting. I think early on when soccer was suspended across the country and everyone was in a very similar state, everyone was kind of looking for comfort from each other, and it led to a lot more collaboration, I felt. And I said this to the technical directors quite a few weeks back. I actually feel like we're closer now than we were pre-pandemic, because we're now having weekly conversations, albeit via video conference, a Microsoft Teams meeting or a Zoom meeting or whatever platform we choose to use. But we're getting closer together. We're starting to share more, and we're starting to share resources more. There's a lot less of this is me and this is mine, and it's a lot more this is us and this is ours. And we're starting to see that cross province, which is, I think, a really positive thing. Would you agree, Doug?
Yeah, for sure. That, one of the things, if you're in a tough spot, what's the opportunity, right? And so for us, we talk to membership, and can we bring us closer together? And I think similar conversations with leadership in Canada Soccer, multiple different groups meeting weekly, executive directors, technical directors, referees, presidents, everybody collaborating, sharing resources, and sharing language when we need to put out new information about what might be coming down the pipeline, sharing policy development in relationship to any of the health practices we need. Just any resources that we needed to be available were shared right across the board within the provinces in Canada, and also with some of our other sports colleagues here in Saskatchewan. So just really grateful for that. And you have to remember what the opportunity is when you're in a bad time. And the opportunity to work well as a team and to continue that in the future, that's something that we hope we can continue long-term.
Yeah. I think that's a really important piece of moving the game forward coast to coast, is that we continue to collaborate, work together. And that doesn't just extend from Canada Soccer to the provinces and territories. That extends to the districts, the regions, the clubs, the academies from coast to coast who are all part of the greater soccer community in Canada. Raheem, you're a member of the Canada Soccer Technical Committee and were tasked with putting together some guidelines from a technical perspective on return to play. What was that process like for you? You did some great work with some of the other provincial TDs in building that document. What was that process like for you?
The process was actually a really enjoyable one. Getting the help from others and using their knowledge, what's going on in their provinces, their own ideas and thoughts, and you had also provided some foundational information as well for us to build off of. It gave us a chance to really dig in to what the world was at that moment in time, but also try and phase in what are potential realities we may face between where we were at that time, which is no sport, no organized sport at all, to getting back to normal life, so to speak. So it was a good process. It was one that allowed for a lot of collaboration, a lot of integration with other provinces, other realities, to try and understand where they are and try and find what would be sort of the best way forward, right? And going beyond just, here are a couple steps, but, really getting into, should soccer look like it has previously when we return within the different phases? So, most provinces right now are at a point where they're having socially distanced soccer. Some provinces are a little bit further ahead. Mm-hmm. But if you do have socially distanced soccer, the necessity for the notion of a team doesn't necessarily need to be there. It can be delivered differently. You can have groups, you can have brothers and sisters on the field at the same time. So you're reducing the amount of travel for parents so that they're not having to go to two separate practices on two separate nights and having to leave the house 4 times a week. So there's a lot of opportunity provided to, also think outside the box. And that's where, some of the information in the considerations and, having read some of the different provincial plans, that information is filtered out there. And it's exciting to see, organizations both within Saskatchewan and then also, through social media, seeing organizations across the country really digging in and doing their best job to provide a safe environment for their participants.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, writing a return to play plan for a pandemic that you've never experienced before is a real challenge for sure. And one of the things that really encouraged me through this has been the collaboration that I've seen across the technical directors committee across Canada with the different provincial and territorial technical directors working collaboratively, the calls we've had with the executive directors and seeing the sharing that's going on there, which was really a positive thing, and something I certainly hope continues when we go back to normal service and normal programming in a lot of ways. In terms of the actual return to play, you do a little bit of coaching, Raheem, and you're getting that opportunity a little bit later on. We won't be able to keep you all afternoon here on the call, but what's that process been like in terms of getting players back on the field, and how important is it for member organizations within Saskatchewan soccer and across the country to follow those return to play plans to a T?
I think it's paramount. As being responsible for the players you work with, or being part of the decision making within your organization, whether it be a board member, coach, employee, safety is the priority. And that's always been the case. It's why we have the responsible coaching movement and rule of two. But the focus on safety from things like the responsible coaching movement and the rule of two doesn't stop with this pandemic. It's now, what do we do, and how do we do the best job we can to keep the athletes safe? And I know the hardest part is really for the athletes making that change. And I think many of them have adapted because they've gone from, a normal life and going to school and having friends and being at soccer now to, more distant soccer. But the opportunity to be back on the field is tremendous for them. They all love being out there. They love kicking a soccer ball around. It's why so many people play. They still have the ability to be social, but just not potentially in the same way that they were before. And then it's just reinforcing some of the rules and restrictions in place. So things like no spitting on the field, and you may not have seen someone for quite some time, but if you're in two different family bubbles, then don't take that opportunity to stand, 6 inches away from each other and have a very long conversation and share a hug. That will come in time. It's more so, when they're at the field, let's do what we can to keep them safe. And the cleaning protocols with regards to soccer balls and coaching equipment, it's an inconvenience potentially right now, but it's not when you think about the athlete's safety first.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's an important consideration for sure. And it's something that I know that clubs and academies across the country are going through right now. They're experiencing that right now. And the communications that I've had with them thus far are that it's difficult, but it's achievable. And it's definitely something that is being done coast to coast right now, which is fantastic. Lisa, I want to talk a little bit about some of your progressive policies. You were the first province, Saskatchewan, to have a transgender policy in place. And you've had progressive policies promoting female participation in coaching. Talk a little bit about that and how important it is for people to have opportunity and for programming to be accessible and inclusive.
If you're transgender, or if it makes it really difficult for you wanting to be involved. So we really want to promote people of all ages, ethnicities, sexual orientation, to get involved with soccer. We believe there's life learning skills there. And opportunities for everybody to participate, either being coaching as a player, as an administrator, as a volunteer. And if there isn't people that look like them, there isn't really it's not attractive for them to want to be involved.
I said earlier, one of the things that really impressed me about the work that was done in Saskatchewan was the fact that it was the first member association to recognize private soccer organizations as full members and get all of the rights and responsibilities of full membership. Doug, talk a little bit about that process. How did you go about doing that? We've talked in previous podcasts with private academies and talked about some of the fear that exists around the concept of a private soccer organization. How did you go about doing that in Saskatchewan, and why was it important to do that?
Well, first and foremost, we sort of had a theme called Everybody Under the Umbrella, right? So we're heading into a time where other provinces are really seeing a pushback from private academies outside of membership and really trying to erode the foundation of traditional membership registration-based soccer. So we took a look at that, and really it was as simple as saying was we want them all the organizations delivering soccer to be a part of the SSA. After that, of course, once we sort of set our mind around that a little bit, there was a lot of work involved, and we had some guidance along the way. A good friend of ours, Paul Berry and Capitus Consulting, helped us. We worked for a long time, a number of years with membership on developing a new and more simplified method of bringing membership into the SSA, and we are proud that we welcomed academies as full members a number of years ago, and really haven't had many problems since. The reality is that academies, whether they're private businesses or non-profit, are welcome, and they add a lot of value, and our members want that service. So we felt it best to bring it within membership rather than having outside of our community competing against us. So took some time, Jason, a lot of collaboration, a lot of leadership from the board and also from the membership to be open to this new model. And we are proud that that's something we did. And we think we paved the way for others to consider that as well. So
yeah, I would absolutely agree with that, Doug. And I've used Saskatchewan soccer as an example in other provinces when talking about how it is possible to bring traditional nonprofit community-based clubs and private soccer organizations into full membership as partners, as collaborators, as colleagues to help drive the game forward. Because ultimately they're doing the exact same thing, which is delivering soccer programming for kids. So kudos to you and your staff and your board for taking that progressive step forward and being leaders in that space. I remember the first time when I set foot in Saskatchewan, I remember mispronouncing the name. Dave corrected me, and so now I'm very conscious of how I say Saskatchewan. But I also remember being sick as a dog and really being unwell and having to speak in front of the membership at the AGM. But I was in the back of the room sitting there with Paul Varian and when the vote took place, and I was amazed because it was a unanimous vote of approval. And when I spoke with yourself and Dave Nutt about this afterwards, Dave was working for the SSA at the time. You both told me that, well, we spent the time. We spent the time and we went out and had conversations and we asked questions and answered questions until people didn't have any more questions. And so it was a unanimous vote. And I think that's imperative. So, that process of going out and addressing concerns and meeting people on their own ground and in their own communities and having those tough conversations, is that a key moving forward, do you think, in other parts of the country to make the same step forward?
For sure. Being willing to have tough conversations is really important. Membership expect open and honest conversation and transparency. And so, we certainly we're out front about what we're intending to do. The board wanted to welcome all those that are interested in being part of the SSA into membership, and that allowed us to bring the academies in. But we did have to roll up our sleeves. We put a lot of miles in. And Paul played an important leadership role for us as a consultant in that process. And we had conversations over a period of time, and allowed us to end up with the vote that you were there to see, Jason. So we're proud of that work, and this model exists in lots of other sports. Golf and gymnastics certainly come to mind as groups that have private owners as part of membership, and there's no reason that shouldn't exist in soccer. And at the end of the day, for me, it's always about again, this notion of everyone pulling in the same direction and having everyone being a part of the governance model, and being part of that and being accountable to that is really important. So at the end of the day, we asked membership, would you rather have them be part of membership and then accountable under the bylaws and the policies, or completely outside of membership and competitive where we have absolutely no control or input or influence on where they take soccer? And our membership bought into that, and it was hard work, as we said, but we're grateful, and it's something that I think we can be proud of.
I'll just add to that too. I think a lot of it was addressing what the fears were, because a lot of the, original feelings were like, no, we don't want them.
Yeah.
We don't want them. But why, finding out what the whys were, addressing what those fears were, and not eliminating those fears necessarily, but, figuring out a way where they could work within the system. And like Doug said, making them accountable as all members are accountable. And that definitely was the turning point for that.
It's fear of change in a lot of ways, isn't it, Lisa? That, there's a fear of the unknown. There's a fear of change. We often default to the status quo. So, when one group has been excluded and kept on the outside, and then the concept of bringing them inside the tent is proposed, the initial reaction is always going to be, well, no, that's change. We're not going to go for that. So I think it's imperative that you take the steps to do the work, to answer the questions, and like Doug said, have those tough conversations. But again, kudos to all of you for the work that you've done in that space. I think you really are leading in many respects across the country. And if any other provinces are looking at examples of how to do this, it's certainly worth looking at Saskatchewan Soccer's approach. What's next for the SSA? I mean, obviously the strategic plan runs out at the end of 2020. You've mentioned, Lisa, that there's some work to be done there on building the next one. What's coming next on the horizon? Pandemic aside, we're all dealing with that, and I think that's an ongoing process. But what's on the horizon for Saskatchewan Soccer?
I'm going to let Raheem answer that. He's our, with the whole of the soccer plan. He's the brains behind that. So, and I'd love to have him speak to that.
Perfect. Excellent. Over to you, Raheem.
Wow. Thanks, Lisa. So we've actually extended our strategic plan to 2021 to align to Canada Soccer's next strategic plan and Sask Sports' next strategic plan, which was, I think, a step that will only make for better alignment with, sort of our governing organization, Sask Sport and Canada Soccer. Over the past couple of years, we've been working on what we had termed our whole of soccer plan, and the pandemic put it on hold in a big way. And it was really about taking our strategic plan, making it, or bringing the technical aspects into a plan to have the right conversations, I think, moving forward. So to give you some examples, in the future, there are going to be Canada Soccer skill centers and Canada Soccer dedicated player programs. And so how do we align that into our grassroots stream? And so what are those environments trying to promote? They're trying to promote nonlinear development, for athletes. And so that's a part of our player initiative, is the promotion of nonlinear development and allowing and supporting organizations to provide that type of programming and understand that type of programming, because it's going to better suit membership. From a competition perspective within our grassroots stream, it's to continue to build off the initial conversation that I think most people have is no scores and standings. But it's not about no scores and standings. It's really about an environment that rewards development over performance.
100%.
And so, we, by sort of changing the phrasing or changing the wording, we can actually dig into that conversation, because no scores and standings is maybe not the right conversation to have.
Yeah. It's the behavior that's associated with the outcome of the game that is driven by coaches and parents in many respects, that negatively impacts on the environment for the children. That's the reason for the removal of scores and standings. And I think you hit the nail on the head there. It's really about having those conversations and about changing the focus. If the focus is on the experience, the environment, the development process, rather than on the outcome of any one specific game or one competition, there's no reason why we can't have conversations about keeping score and keeping standings. Because you know what? The kids are keeping score. They know what the score of the game is, even though it's not being recorded, but there's no need for it to be recorded, is there?
No, not at all. And I think that score is ultimately the easiest notion that people have hung on to as tangibles for development. Like, hey, in this game, we won 1-0. So that means that we're good. But the next game, we won 3-0. And it's like, sure, but that team that you beat for the second time 3-0 may have had no subs, right? So it lacks context. And I think it can be used sometimes as an easy marker to determine, measures of development, which they aren't actually, that's not the case potentially, right? Because there's so much more nuance to it. So a big part of our whole soccer plan was just alignment to the vast number of initiatives, I have to say, coming from Canada Soccer. And I don't say that in a negative way. It's a huge positive, because Canada Soccer is leading. They're giving us the Canada Soccer Club licensing program. We have new and revamped coaching education, skill centers, dedicated player programs. There's so much that's happening, and it's about aligning how we are organized to that. And so to build off of that is then, we've taken the club licensing program and we've allocated it across our competitive spectrum. So in the future, and we're going to have, if you're a PTSO 1 or 2, you're going to have access to specific environments, which is already seen in terms of the National Youth Club license holders having access to their high performance leagues or environments within their provinces. But we're bringing that across our whole spectrum. So, if you want to play in our competitive stream, for example, you're going to have to be a PTSO 1 or 2. And then within that, building in the standards around coaching and referee education. So laying out well in advance. And I think we started this process in 2018 of developing coaching standards based on each stream of participation. So the community courses are meant for the community stream. Some people may call that recreational, some people may call that house league. But the community stream courses are meant for those environments. And so when you get into an environment where kids are training 3 or 4 times a week and it's competitive, the coaching education should match the desire and commitment from the athlete. And so that's where we've built in coaching standards in terms of a head coach and assistant coach must have specific levels based on the age that they're coaching at. So the competitive, grassroots is for us 13 and down. So the competitive stream is really U15, U17 for youth. And at 15 and 17, there are specific coaching markers that they must have. And in addition to that, then there's also the progression for coaches within their own organization. So everyone knows what they need to achieve in order to coach at a specific level. And there's succession planning built within it because, instead of just having a head coach have, let's say be C license certified, and then having every other coach, just having, let's say, a soccer for life, it takes a little bit of time to become C license certified. And you've got to go through that process and you can't rush it. Everyone has a different duration by which they need to grow in order to achieve, being a C license certified coach. And so having the assistant coaches be C license trained means they're only one step away. And so that helps our organizations know from a planning perspective as well, like, hey, we have these age groups coming up. We need to get our coaches started on their coaching education early. And I think that I've yet to encounter anyone that has come out of a coaching course and said, that's made me a worse coach. And I think that's a part of it is getting people into that environment, providing them a good educational environment. And we're really fortunate to have some, wonderful coach educators in our province that have allowed that to happen and fostered a desire for growth and knowledge and support them in that environment and develop those relationships with them. And I think that's such an impactful way of supporting coaching development and coaching growth that we've seen a huge uptake. So, even down to meeting one of our other strategic goals, which talks about encouraging and engaging more coaches between the ages of 16 and 25 to adopt coaching. Last summer, we had a C license that we delivered in our province geared specifically for for students within that age range, 18 to 25, where they could do a C license free of charge. And we had 25 participants, 20 of whom were female.
Wow.
And had played at university or had been a part of our REX program here. And so, having these standards helps provide a framework for everyone to work around and to really promote and harness coaching education, because coaches have the biggest impact on players. Better coaches, better players. And we can also meet the player at their desired level of commitment with coaches that have the right level of education to go with it.
Great answer. There's a load to unpack there for sure. One couple of things that stuck out for me in what you just said, Raheem, was this notion of coaches are not going to come out of a coaching course worse than they were going in. I think what we stress to all of the coaches that come on any of our courses is you're only going to get out of this process what you put into it. But the onus is on us as the coach educators to create a safe, welcoming, inclusive environment where there is no fear of failure, where there is no fear of being singled out for not having certain competencies, and really create an environment where people feel safe safe to fail, knowing that there isn't going to be any sort of a tick against their name if they're not able to do something right away. So I think that's an important piece. You mentioned a couple of terms there that I just want to bring everybody up to speed with. And one other thing that you mentioned as well, which is your whole of soccer plan was kind of put on pause because of the global pandemic. And I completely agree with you. I think everyone has kind of done that. But you mentioned a couple of terms there: skill center program, dedicated player program. The grassroots standards are another one. So the standards that we've been working on at the technical committee level for the delivery of grassroots programming from coast to coast. These are really guidelines for organizations to strive towards as best practice. And these are something we're aiming to get released by the end of 2020 with a view to implementing them as a recommendation in 2021. So that stuff is coming. It's on the horizon, but we'll certainly discuss that in more detail in future episodes, perhaps get you back on to do an explanation of how you're implementing it at Saskatchewan Soccer, because you gave a wonderful explanation of the work that you're doing right there. I'm conscious of everyone's time, and it's been a brilliant discussion. I love working with all three of you because I always come out of it energized and feeling like I have a better understanding of what you're doing in your own province, but also knowing that you're committed to doing the work across the country and helping the other provinces, which is something that we've seen over and over again over the last 3 months. So Lisa, Doug, Raheem, thank you very much for taking the time to join us on the Canada Soccer Nation podcast. Keep up the great work. Most importantly, stay safe. And thank you very much for taking the time. Much appreciated.
Thanks, Jason.
Thanks, Jason.
Thanks, Jason.
Excellent. Well, listen, when we come back after the break, we'll have Brad's recollection of the conversation, what his key points and key takeaways were, and we will talk about what's coming up in weeks to come. Join us after the break. Thanks very much. Welcome back to the Canada Soccer Nation podcast, joined now by Brad Fougere, Digital and Corporate Communications Manager with Canada Soccer. Brad, you had a passenger seat to that interesting conversation with Lisa Bagan-Lurie, Doug Peterson, and Raheem Mohammed from the Saskatchewan Soccer Association. What was the key takeaway for you? What stood out for you in that conversation?
How great they are. I think, I think the key takeaway is that being a willing collaborator is a very, very important thing. Particularly in federal, provincial sort of, national sporting body or national body in any way, and provincial relations. That's my past as well, a past job. And when someone's a true collaborator in the way that they disagree with you. We talked about this briefly. There are productive ways to disagree with somebody, which usually looks a lot like providing your counterpoint and potentially a new solution to an issue in a collaborative way that should be well supported and is definitely the spirit of how Saskatchewan Soccer comes to the table at any time. I think they've got a great president who I've had the pleasure of meeting a few times at Futsal Canadian Championships. They've got an excellent executive director. It's quite clear that he's passionate about community development. That probably plays a part in his willingness to collaborate as he does. And no one knows better than you how great Raheem is. I've seen some of his work with the technical committee and have always been impressed by his thoughtfulness and his willingness to ask for support when he needs it. We've had the opportunity to collaborate a few times and just speak truth about challenges that we're facing, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a legacy of really great people that have come to support the game out of Saskatchewan. We talked about a few of them, obviously Dave, and the integral work he's doing around the National Club Licensing Program in your department. And Don Story, his work looms large over the way that Canada Soccer has taken advantage of the things that have happened since 1999, 2007, 2014 and 15, et cetera, et cetera. So there's just really great people there.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. It's a pleasure working with them because I'm genuine when I say this. I always feel like I come out of a conversation with them feeling energized and confident and excited about what the future of soccer looks like. Is it perfect? No, it's never going to be perfect. Not anywhere, I think, in the world is it going to be perfect. But when we do have differences of opinion or we are faced with challenging situations and circumstances, it's important that we deal with them in a respectful manner. And I always feel that we get that when we interact with the folks in Saskatchewan. And that's a credit to the people that have come before. And again, I go back and talk about the godfather of governance, Mr. Story, who's set a very good precedent there, I think, for that level of civil discourse and the ability to have difficult conversations and to do so in a respectful manner. And I think that's carried on through Lisa's leadership as the president, through Doug's leadership as the executive director, and obviously Raheem's leadership on the technical side. So it's great to hear the work that they're doing and really excited for what the future holds there. So, and anyways, I know everyone's busy. We all pressed for time. It seems like we're bouncing from one call to the next call, and I'm overdue 6 minutes for my next call. So I know I'm going to have to shoot, and I know you are as well. So we'll leave it there for today. And thank all of you for listening, for being here, being part of the journey, being part of this experience. We're certainly enjoying this process. If you have any recommendations for us, send us an email at podcast@canadasoccer.com. It'll come directly to me and Brad. If you have any suggestions for topics you'd like to see discussed on the podcast, guests that you might like to hear from, profiles that you might like to see of individuals within the game, just let us know via email, podcast@canadasoccer.com, and we'll do our best to get them on and get you the content that you're looking for. So as always, take care of each other, be well, stay safe, and we'll see you next week. Have a good one.